Good afternoon and welcome for our webinar. This is the Center for Experiential Learning, and we're going to be discussing our global reach and global impact. Joining me today are several individuals within the Center for Experiential Learning, as well as our fellow graduate students. Daniel Bentle, the director of the CEL and former graduate of the MBA program here at Olin. Myself, Beth Doors. I have my master's in education from Illinois State University. Joining me as well is Conn Davis, who has his undergraduate in biomedical science, as well as a JD from DePaul University. Courtney Lee, who is a soon-to-be graduate and has her undergraduate in business economics. Along with her, we have Chris Pavlow, who has his undergraduate in the Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry, as well as a JD from Boston College. And then finally joining us is Ishita Gupta, who has her computer engineering degree. A few housekeeping items we'd like to talk to you about. First, can everyone hear me? If you cannot hear me, please use that message board in your computer and let us know. Also, if you have questions, use the Q&A box and be able to provide us that information. We may be able to answer it throughout the presentation. If we're not able to get to that, Megan Waite will follow up from the Graduate Programs Office with any other questions you may have. Today's agenda, we're going to focus on what is the Center for Experiential Learning, and then briefly go over a couple of different stories from current graduate students, and then at the conclusion, any other questions that you may have. So let's get started. What is the Center for Experiential Learning? Well, we're two things. We're a learning center, but we're also a business. And Daniel Bentle is going to talk a little bit further about what we do and how we do that. So please welcome Daniel Bentle.
Thanks, Beth. So as Beth had mentioned, we're a couple of things, and we like to think of ourselves primarily as a business run by the university. So we're a consulting practice in which our greatest asset is our students that we have sitting in this very room. Some of the best and the brightest that we deploy on projects with clients around the globe, and we're going to focus on a little bit of that this afternoon as well. Any success that we've had in the last few years of intense growth has been predicated on our philosophy, which is student-driven and faculty-guided, in which our students are very much put in the driver's seat. Chris and Courtney and Conn and Ishita are going to talk about that a little bit today, and the responsibility that's been placed upon them to bring these projects together for their teams and for their clients. So our global reach. We do a lot of work in markets all around the globe. And right now, alone, we have teams working on 5 different continents, wrapping up projects in Shanghai and the like. But one of the things that is a more recent concrete commitment at the Olin Business School, and something that sets us apart, is our compassion for the community globally. And so while we continue to do work in developed markets around the globe, we're also making a commitment to work in more out-of-the-way places, in frontier and developing markets with NGOs and small businesses around the world that need the kind of help that you guys, that our business school students, can provide. And so not just doing work in even emerging markets like the United Arab Emirates, but also in markets that again are emerging now and are developing, and even in some cases are post-conflict areas like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where we're doing some work right now, and even working with some of our own. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is leveraging our network, the university's network, and also our students' network, to make connections with businesses around the globe that we can help. You see here in this photo on the far left is Marky Kolber. And Marky, before coming to the Olin Business School, established, after retiring the Peace Corps in Rwanda, a small business called the Women's Bakery that empowers local women with an understanding of how to bake bread and provide supplement for their families, and build bakeries at the grassroots level that they own and they operate. And this is an organization that we've been supporting for the last couple of years. Courtney Lee is going to talk a little bit about that this afternoon as well. And we have a project right now in which the team's going to be leaving very shortly. And the commitment here, as our new dean puts it, is to get in the way of social injustice, of lack of access to education, a lack of access to resources, and even extreme poverty and social injustice. And that's a commitment that we've made at the Owen Business School to support local business leaders and entrepreneurs around the globe who are doing good work that we want to be a part of, in addition to working with larger organizations around the globe. And the objective here in all of this is to provide a richer personal and professional narrative for our students. Stories behind a reason in the passport, stories behind a stamp in the passport, and a reason for being on the ground in the different destinations that our students visit. In the last year alone, we've had teams working on 5 different continents, and in the last 23 years since the CEL's inception, we've had field research in Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, and South America as well. Here's just a brief sampling of organizations we've worked with in the last couple of years that present a diverse mix, everyone from Red Bull, sending teams to the west coast of the US, to a small coffee cooperative in rural Colombia, to a soccer club in Ecuador, to a pharmaceutical firm in Lyon, France, which I think Chris may speak to briefly during time as well. So the bottom line for all of these experiences, and Beth will walk through it in a little bit more detail, those programs that we offer and then those that we're going to focus on today, is that these are highly ambiguous and messy situations. Most of these, again, involve travel. They involve a client in a real-world situation, and it provides a very unstructured, nonlinear, interdisciplinary experience that a comfort with the unknown is critical in success in these things. And that is one of the things that all of the students that we engage with understand from the outset, that this is going to be difficult. It's not easy, and therefore it's going to be that much more formative as well.
So as you can see, the Center for Experiential Learning provides real clients with real projects and creating that real impact. As you can see, within the last 2 years, we've had a variety of different successes. If you look at the bottom right, you can see how many hours of impact in the last two years we've had locally, regionally, and globally. Over 94,000 hours of impact our students are able to provide. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what the Center for Experiential Learning is. We are an academic course credited programs. We have a total of 7 different unique programs that we focus on, whether it's our MBA students or even our specialized master's students. Today's focus is primarily on the CEL practicum, as well as the global management studies. The CEL practicum is offered in the fall and spring, whereas the global management studies is offered in the spring only. So what do our alumni say about our experience? Here's our very own Micah Northcutt, who just recently graduated, that talks about his MBA learning experience and how the CEL was able to connect to his bottom line and creating that impact and getting those skills necessary to be a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. So let's get into our different programs. We have first the CEL practicum. What started out in '91 with 8 students and 2 companies has grown over 130 students and 26 clients across 5 continents. Wow, what an impact. We've been able to work with a variety of different industries such as healthcare, manufacturing, wholesale and distribution, clients such as what Daniel mentioned before, as well as projects such as strategic planning, supply chain and finance, as well as international development. To talk further about our opportunities is the exciting part, is working with our graduate students and telling their story. So allow me to introduce Conn Davis. As I mentioned before, he received his JD and he is claimed the recovering lawyer of the group. So please allow me to introduce Conn to talk a little bit about his experience with MP Logistics, as well as his experience as a current CEL graduate fellow.
Great, thank you very much, Beth. As Beth mentioned, my name is Conn Davis, and yes, I am a recovering lawyer. I practiced law for 5 years before coming back to get my MBA, and I will tell you it was the best decision I ever made outside of marrying my wife. Now, my client in the CEL practicum, so I was a first-year team lead last year during the first year of my MBA in the spring semester. So basically a year ago this semester. And my client was a company called MP Logistics. Now, MP Logistics is a third-party logistics provider. That means they don't manufacture anything themselves. Instead, what they do is basically move goods throughout the country of Vietnam and then import and export as well into and out of Vietnam. Now, the cool thing about MP Logistics, in my opinion, is they are a private enterprise that operates in a communist system. And what they are is essentially one of the largest privately owned, Vietnamese-owned businesses in Vietnam. Now, as a lot of you are probably aware, Vietnam is becoming a manufacturing hub in Southeast Asia. And this has created a ton of opportunities for companies like MP Logistics. At the same time, though, they did not have the management controls in place to grow effectively and efficiently. So they reached out to the Center for Experiential Learning with a very broad problem. How do we grow effectively? How do we capture economies of scale and not diseconomies of scale? So my team was basically put in charge of looking at their operations from that lens. How do they grow effectively and how do they grow efficiently? Now, the interesting thing here is they're halfway around the world. So all of our client meetings early on were here for us in St. Louis, and for the client, we're in Vietnam. So we were either meeting with them at 8 o'clock at night via Skype or WebEx, or 7 o'clock in the morning via Skype or WebEx. And it really created a lot of barriers to us being able to efficiently do our work and communicate. On top of that, there were cultural barriers that were in place simply because they didn't know who we were, and Vietnam is still very much a trust-based system. They don't do a lot of hiring people outside of their companies to come in and consult, especially for businesses that are not state-owned enterprises, but instead really family-owned enterprises, which is what this is. So until we actually got our feet on the ground in Saigon, we weren't able to really break those barriers down and accomplish a lot. We got to understand the problem, but to really understand what the client did or what true challenges they were facing, we didn't get that till we were on site. And I think it was about 2 days on site, where we went out and saw their actual trucks and their actual operations, their actual fleet, and how they operated. And while we were there, we really got to learn the challenges they were facing on a day-to-day basis. And during that and talking about it, it was amazing to see the light come on for the client when they realized these people understand what we're going through and are actually bringing new ideas about how to solve that and how to approach it. And really, we were able to take the next step with the client and accelerate our relationship. So from that point forward, I mean, it was a completely different experience as far as working with our client. They opened up, they shared all kinds of information, they actually put us in contact with their clients in Vietnam to help them learn how to work through issues. So it was a really rewarding experience in that end. We were able to wrap up at the end and make some great recommendations. And actually the relationship with the Center for Experiential Learning and this particular client has continued forward. So it's been very good and very rewarding to see that continue to grow. Following my experience as a team lead during my first year at the MBA program, I was actually asked to continue on in the experiential learning in a role called the CEL Fellow. What that is essentially a promotion from being a team lead, if you will. What I get to do as the CEL Fellow is a couple of things. One, I get to work with a lot of clients before the projects even start to really scope those projects out, be involved in the selling process of those projects. So it's very rewarding from that regard. Additionally, once the projects are running, I get to work with teams and work with clients to make sure communication's going well, projects are being executed, and the projects are basically on track and running as they should. So that's been a very rewarding perspective or experience to basically step back and get a new perspective on how everything is run. So that's kind of a high-level overview of my experience with the CEL. Beth would like to jump in and say something now, so go ahead, Beth.
Absolutely. Conn, you talked about the CEL Graduate Fellow and really working with different teams and clients. What have you seen in terms of the interdisciplinary approach that the Center for Experiential Learning has on their teams? Meaning, you may be working with your fellow classmates in the MBA program or specialized master's students or undergraduate students or even JD students. So Talk to us about what that philosophy looks like and what you've been able to see in the teams that you've been able to work with.
Sure. So I actually think that's really interesting. The most effective teams are actually the teams that are very interdisciplinary. So they'll have an MBA, they'll have a specialized master's student or two, they'll have a JD. The more diverse perspectives we're able to put on any particular team really accelerates the ability of that team to accomplish goals. What's great about that process too is everyone gets to learn with people, then work with people that think differently than they do. And from a student's point of view, the ability to learn to work with multiple diverse sets of stakeholders and interest groups is really a powerful learning experience and something that you're going to need to be able to do once you leave school and are actually out on the job. So during the team formation process, it's actually very important for the CEL, because as a graduate fellow, I'm able to actually participate in that process. It's very important for us to make sure we have diverse teams, because we find that those are the most successful teams. I'd like to now pass it on to Courtney Lee, and she's going to talk about her experience in the CEO practicum with the Women's Bakery.
Thanks, Conn. My name is Courtney Lee, and I'm currently a second-year MBA here at WashU. And I worked on this project with the Women's Bakery last year in the spring of my first year. As in my background, like Conn, I had 5 years of work experience. I worked in finance, so I sold mutual funds to financial advisors before I came to business school, and I'll be pursuing finance after business school as well. So as Daniel mentioned in Conn, my client was the Women's Bakery, and I was actually on a team of 3 people. I'm in the middle there, and to my right is, or to my left, excuse me, is Mark Smith, who was our team lead for the project. The Women's Bakery, I think Daniel touched on a little bit earlier, but they're a social enterprise that provides women with a vocational business school education. And then after that training period is over, they help the women to open, manage, and operate their bakeries. These bakeries source local ingredients, so it helps to create a microeconomy and within their communities, provide nutrition to the families, because malnutrition is a big issue there. In addition to that, it helps with economic empowerment for the women, because after opening and operating these bakeries, they're finding that these women are doubling, if not tripling, their income. So our project, similar to Conn's, was very broad and ambiguous. So they asked us to evaluate their operations and to come up with a strategic plan to help them grow sustainably in Rwanda for the next 2 to 3 years. So as Daniel mentioned as well, our client was Marky Kolber, who is one of my classmates and founded the Women's Bakery back in 2014. After her time as a Peace Corps volunteer in a small town in Rwanda called Bushoga. Our partnership was very different to Conn's in that we didn't have time zone issues, because we were predominantly working with Marky, and her being one of our classmates, our meeting times were very effective and efficient. So anytime we had questions or concerns or needed to clear up confusion, we could just very easily pull her into our meetings and get her perspective. So that was really helpful for understanding and wrapping our heads around not only a complicated business model, but also a fast-changing business model, because we were able to bounce our brainstorming sessions off of her, and she could tell us right away, hey, that's changed, or we've taken care of that. So that was something that was really exciting, in addition to the ambiguity of the project, was how fast-paced it was. So as far as the project is concerned, and our site visit, we actually had an opportunity to go to Rwanda, and it was really important for us to actually get on the ground, because although we kind of understood the problems from speaking with Marky and her team, we got to see them firsthand. And when we got to Rwanda, we were about halfway through our project, and we were at the stage of, we were diagnosing some of the problems, and also brainstorming some ownership structures that they might be able to employ at the bakeries themselves, because we felt that that could address some of the problems that they were having and would help them to scale more quickly in Rwanda. And once we got there, there were a lot of benefits to going on the ground, but one specific example really stands out in my mind is we were there at the Remera Bakery, which is in Kigali, Rwanda, the capital, for the women's graduation. So there are 15 women in this graduating class. So they're graduating from training. So we had an opportunity to interview them, just chat with them, observe them as they were preparing bread for the ceremony. So, but in those interactions and in observing their operations, one of our best recommendations came out of that. And we realized that their training model was to train all the women and give them each the same skill set. So similar to your first year of business school, you take marketing, finance, accounting, everything, and then your second year you start to specialize a little bit more. So a light bulb went off for us, and we said, well, the woman in the red dress there, she showed a propensity and an interest and a skill set in sales and marketing. And the woman to her right in the green, she's actually illiterate. So she was mostly doing a lot of the operational things in the bakery, making sure the pans were ready for the bread to be placed in, cleaning the dishes and making sure things were operating efficiently. So we thought it would be very beneficial for not everybody to receive the exact same training, but to provide specialized training to shorten training time and also so that the women can begin earning higher income sooner. So that's one specific example out of many that really stood out to me as being extremely important to have the opportunity to go on the ground and observe the operations in person. So that was a really rewarding experience. And right now, they actually have implemented all of our core recommendations. So with the training, revising the training schedule, helping to control the value chain, all of that they've already implemented. So that's really rewarding to see our hard work being put into place immediately and seeing the impact of that. The other thing I wanted to mention was, Conn mentioned interdisciplinary teams. My team, I have a finance background. Our team lead had an accounting background. And then our third team member, she had a teaching background. So she taught in South Korea for 10 years. And that came into handy with a lot of our recommendations regarding training. So we were able to bounce ideas off each other. It was helpful for brainstorming sessions because we all came at it with very different perspectives. Even though finance and accounting sound similar, they're not. And then in addition to what we brought to the table is also what we were able to utilize. So in the project itself, this is our spring of our first year. We were able to utilize what we learned in strategy, finance, operations, and marketing to help TWB, the Women's Bakery, increase and create social impact. So it's not, you'll be able to utilize things as you're learning them, which is something that was incredibly rewarding. And I heard it when I went to my first CEL practicum presentation from Micah Northcutt, who you saw in the picture earlier. He mentioned that this should absolutely be a requirement for graduation. I couldn't agree with him more because it really puts the skills and learning that you're receiving to the test in a real ambiguous, fast-moving situation. Yes, Beth.
I'm in the back. So Courtney, you talked a little bit about the CL practicum and the matching process that it takes. You know, what made you interested within the women's bakery, or how did you select the projects that you were interested in to really, make that impact that you were looking for?
In the beginning, before I knew which clients the CEL had brought to the table for us to work for, I wanted to be in the CEL to be able to utilize, I wanted those finance specific projects. And then when I saw the list of projects, the Women's Bakery stood out to me specifically because of their social impact. Economic empowerment, especially for women, is something that I'm particularly passionate about, and I understand and appreciate the doors and opportunities that education provides. So to find an organization that addresses both of the things that I'm passionate about, and it had a component of finance in it, that's really what attracted me to the CEL, but more specifically the Women's Bakery project.
Great. And Conn and Courtney, in terms of looking at your aspirations in your career or your next phase after you graduate in the next couple of months, hard to believe, how does the Center for Experiential Learning and these experiences you've done impact that direction? So Micah talked a little bit about what his experience looked like, but how does this connect to your career aspirations?
Sure. Well, so for me, I'm going into consulting once I leave the program here. I've got a job with Bain & Company. And what, for me, this means is it's confidence, right? You've been in an ambiguous situation. You've handled problems that when you walked into them, you didn't know how to start. You learn how to structure a problem. You learn how to work with a team when the stakes are pretty high and you don't 100% know what you're doing. So that level of confidence that my project gave me, I'm absolutely going to use and take into my work experience. From there, my actual experience then as the graduate fellow since that time has allowed me even more to take a step back and see how the big picture connects, how you can move the needle on a team with just focusing in the right areas or thinking through things in a new way, and learning how to work with clients in that frame of mind is very powerful.
And for me, it's kind of twofold. So post-graduation, I'll be working for State Street, which is an institutional asset management firm in Boston. And one of the things that's helpful for me is Conn mentioned the ambiguity, and it gives you the confidence that you're able to deal with that ambiguity. But more specifically from a technical standpoint, one of the things that we were able to provide the women's bakery with is a financial model built from scratch based on what information they needed. In my experience, financial models are mostly derived from financial statements, and it's kind of plug and play. It's pretty standard. It's pretty standard template. But to be able to build something that can analyze the financial health and future of a startup is something that gives me so much more confidence than picking up a model template and just plugging and playing. And then the other component of that is I'm actually staying on. I'm staying on as the finance director on the board for the Women's Bakery to help them to continue to grow and sustainably, not just in Rwanda, but in East Africa. So it's something that I'll be continuing to work with going forward.
Great, thank you. So as you can see within the CEL practicum, as Daniel mentioned earlier, we have an approach in terms of being student-driven, faculty-guided, ambiguous. So Conn and Courtney talked a little bit about that ambiguity within their own projects. And it's also interdisciplinary. So as Conn mentioned, as well as Courtney, we really tried to take advantage of all of the skills within WashU to deliver that impact, to look at that global reach a little bit more holistically. So as we talk about global reach, we're going to talk a little bit more about one of our programs, which is a half a semester course offered in the very beginning of the spring semester, which is our Global Management Studies. It was started in 1997 with 23 students who felt that energy and that wish to gain that international perspective, to really understand an industry within a particular country, and also to immerse themselves in that particular country's culture. So that's what really started that experience within Global Management Studies. As you can see within the past year, we've had the opportunity for folks, 67 students, to travel to 3 different continents in 3 different trips. I'm going to have Chris talk a little bit first about his experience. What's unique about Chris is not only is he awesome, there you go, a little shout out to you, Mr. President, from our GBSA, but he also was the lead for the particular trip he went to, which was Colombia. So he's going to talk a little bit about that process on how we were able to get that trip online and what that experience would look like. Chris?
Thanks, Beth. You're awesome as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
As Beth mentioned, I also am the GBSA president, as well as I got the chance to lead not only the GMS trip to Colombia, but also another CEL program, the practicum for Biomiri, which is a pharmaceutical company out of Lyon, France, last semester as well. As she mentioned, I'm Chris Pavlow. I'm a second-year MBA graduate in a couple months. Like Conn, I too am a recovering attorney. I think I'll forever be recovering. I came from Boston. I had my own firm, and I worked at a patent law firm as well. And my chance to come to Olin has definitely been the biggest and best choice I've ever made. So talking about the GMS program, what's unique about that is that it's a little more student-guided than the other programs in the CEL. What does that mean? Well, the suggestions for the countries that the GMS program travels to all come from student suggestions. So there's a process where we narrow down as many as probably 6 to 8 suggestions of different countries or different trips to the final 3 that students can go on each year. And so the process that we used was actually a little unique. I had traveled to Bogota about a year before coming to Olin with my best friend from high school, who actually weirdly happens to be an Olin alum as well from 6 years previous. We chose Colombia for our own reasons. It looked like a fun vacation spot. It was a little inexpensive to go there. And we had both had some but minimal experience in South America. Fast forward to another year and a half where I'm at Olin, and one of my good friends, Alan Croitoru, is actually a Colombian citizen. And so he wanted to travel to Colombia, not only to visit his father's business, which is one of the flower cutting farms down there. So any of you who bought roses for your loved ones yesterday probably got it from Colombia, because they're one of the biggest exporters of flowers in the world. So that was kind of the impetus behind choosing Colombia this time around. And we kind of ran with that. We didn't want to just go visit one city, so we ended up visiting Bogota, Medellin, and also Cartagena to give us a full experience of the different cultures and businesses within the country. So the pitch process basically came down to word of mouth. We had to structure not only the type of trip we wanted to pursue, but also get the word out and let our friends kind of build interest. We focused mostly on supply chain and agribusiness just because that was what Alan had the most experience in, and also as a growing country in international business, Colombia had a lot more opportunities for us to go and see these type of businesses, anywhere from a startup cheese factory to a coffee plantation to an international shipping port. So we had a good variety of businesses to kind of speak to everyone's desires and interests of what they wanted to see on the trip. So we actually had a faculty member join us as a guy, as an advisor, who was the supply chain kind of core platform professor. And we actually had a good relationship with him before because he taught us the core class in that fall semester. And he was able to provide guidance as to, okay, these are the type of businesses we should be looking at. These are the type of lessons that we want to be teaching during the short 8-week course. And the coursework wasn't really as intense as it is in the normal classwork, because what they really want to focus on is the experience of the other, the experience of being in a different country. This is the Center for Experiential Learning after all. One quick fun fact over there is that you see Colombia may not be spelled correctly.
What happened there?
So this is actually a technique we used last year when people would spell it like Columbia, Missouri, which is a local town here that everyone's familiar with. Colombia is actually spelled with an O, the country. So we used to say, no, Colombia doesn't have a U. The only U that belongs in Colombia is you, meaning the person should travel with us on a GMS trip. And we actually did max out the number of people. We had a wait list of people who wanted to come on here. And I think last year, all 3 trips that traveled were almost maxed out, if not maxed out. So there's a large variety of opportunities and a larger variety of interest in these trips. You see me here in the picture with KK. He was actually a class above me, and we became good friends. One of the best things about these GMS trips is that they're not as intense as the CEL practicums. So while you're still getting the nice exposure to different ideas and different teams, it allows you to connect and network internally a little bit better as well. So we had 25 students. It was a good mix between first and second years. And some of my best friendships were actually formed with the second years on that trip. So almost 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through my MBA career, or my first year MBA career, that's when I finally started to connect with these students. The next slide kind of shows one of the pictures. This is in Bogota at the top of Mount Montserrat. So not only did we go to visit businesses, but we actually took some sightseeing tours as well to kind of really get a feel for the culture. There's not many people in this picture because we went on an off day, but this is one of the leading worship sites in Bogota. So on Sunday mornings, they actually have a church at the top of the mountain 2 miles up, which people go and trek to. Some people actually make a pilgrimage on their hands and knees up to 2 miles of the mountain and make it a kind of weekly event. So we really got to know the people well. Moving forward, so this is actually a picture in Medellin of a coffee packaging facility. One of the best parts of this trip was actually seeing Cafe Pergamino. It's a company based out of Colombia, where in one day in Medellin, we saw the farm on the mountainside where the coffee beans were being grown. we saw the facility on the side of the mountain that actually separated and dried the beans. Here you see the beans being ground and packaged. And then we actually went to their cafe. They have a cafe in downtown Medellin where we had the coffee samples, if you will. So in one day, we saw the entire supply chain for a coffee chain. And I can guarantee we brought back a lot of it with us as well. And finally, this is Cartagena. Cartagena is more known as a beach destination for tourists. However, there's cranes all over the city. None you can see in this picture, but in downtown Cartagena is really growing as a center for commerce. This is because it's one of the world's largest ports. I think it's the second largest port. I forgot what the first one was, but it's because a lot of the ships that travel through the Panama Canal between the Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean stop in Cartagena. And we actually did see that port. And just to show how far-reaching your class goes, we actually had 2 people on the trip that had connections to this port. One of the container ships that was docked there, the company who owned that used to be owned by one of our classmates who was on the trip with us, who was a Chinese national. And the other was a tugboat captain from Florida who had actually docked that boat in his experience in Jacksonville, Florida, years prior. So it's a really small world, and this kind of helped emphasize that and really hammer home that it's a small world and we all should be experiencing it. This is kind of goes to the CEL's message, right? It's experiencing other cultures, other opinions, and other ideas. And while some of the practicums that Conn and Courtney spoke to really emphasize that in small team settings, the GMS kind of gives a little less pressure and lets you experience it, kind of taking from it what you want in a more relaxed setting, but still a very valuable setting. Now, my leadership in this practicum actually gave me the opportunity to, this program, it wasn't a practicum. This program actually gave me the chance to lead a practicum actually last fall, where I just wrapped up a travel to Lyon, France in January with a pharmaceutical company, bioMérieux. And so that those 2 experiences were very different, but both very valuable. And I highly recommend if you do come to Olin that you take advantage of both of them, because I really do think that they give you a dynamic perspective on not only the world, but also yourself, because you learn a lot about how you perceive things as well. And so with that, I will hand this over to Ishita Gupta to talk about the Cuba trip that ran concurrently with Colombia.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris. I actually learned more about the Colombia trip right now than I had from previous experiences. Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ishita. I am also a second-year MBA. I'm the one on the right in those red and white sunglasses.
Looks good.
Very fashion forward over there.
Yeah, you had to be. Folks in Cuba were very on top of their trends, surprisingly, given their limited access to the outside world. But one of the reasons that I chose Cuba was that I have been really interested in salsa and everything to do with Cuban salsa, which is one of the most popular forms of the dance, since many years now. And when I realized that there's an opportunity to go visit that place, to actually learn salsa in that birthplace, I jumped at the opportunity. I was fortunate enough to be joined by Colin, who is in the center, and D'Angela, along with 2 other members who were part of the leadership team here. And I think the best part about organizing something to a location as previously untouched by, say, learning experiences from US schools is that, we had a blank slate. We could chart our own schedule. We could decide which avenues we wanted to visit and which we might wanted to, skip. And I think that was one of the other reasons which really encouraged me to step up for this opportunity. So other than salsa and the opportunity to lead a team and the very fact that Cuba is just wrapped in this bubble of mystic, just vintage, mystique, that that it's stopped at this moment in time, and I really wanted to visit that. So when we decided as a team, and we also consulted our classmates as to which areas they would like to identify and explore when they would visit Cuba. So it was really more of a grouping process. we came to the conclusion that given the climate last year, we actually happened to visit just a week before the president visited over there, and we visited that same baseball field that he was then, videotaped and saying a lot of really uplifting things next week, especially about Airbnb, and we can get to that in a moment. So we decided that we would focus on entrepreneurship because there were so many opportunities for entrepreneurs up and coming in Cuba once the embargo would be part lifted or potentially lifted off in the future. And one of the other avenues that we focused on was, of course, tourism, because while there are a certain number of American visitors there, the place is overrun almost with European and Asian visitors. I was reading a statistic. It almost made it sound like Cuba has 2 times more the population of the country itself come and go throughout the year. And given their limited infrastructure, that is a feat. And that actually brings me to like where we stayed. We were fortunate enough to, again, it was sort of the adventurous spirit of the trip. We all stayed in Airbnbs. We chose to stay in Havana Vieja, which is the south part of the city. It doesn't have the big industries or the biggest offices, but it has the most hip and cultural feel because it'll have all the restaurants, it'll have all the entertainment joints. It was right next to the sea. And I don't even need to mention, I think you all will see in this picture I think this is one of Havana Vieja, the color. Yes, every building was a different color. It looked like the Three Sisters, that iconic shot in San Francisco. Pretty much every building looked like that. Every step was a photo op. All of these cars, yes, it looks like you're in an episode from the Jetsons when you go over there. And it is not that uncommon to sit in one of these. Many of them are convertibles and just enjoy maybe an hour or two cruising around the city. It is truly a very luxurious experience, which is made affordable just because, again, Cuba is in this transitional period where so many people can enjoy so much of this untouched charm. We had a faculty member join us for the trip, and how we prepared for the trip was, again, we were at capacity, as Chris mentioned. Last year, it was a really exciting time, as it is this year as well. Everyone was joined by all of their classmates, and many partners attended the trip as well with classmates. We also had a capacity of 30 students. Again, a lot of folks wanted to visit, and with good reason. It's Cuba. So I'm Indian, and I don't necessarily have a restriction on my passport to visit, but a lot of people found that this would be one opportunity to visit Cuba under an education visa, and that was a really exciting thing, which encouraged participation. So the moment we released that, yes, the Cuba trip is activated and we're organizing it, I think the next date was filled up. And I actually had to make a request. I said, guys, I'm the one who's actually leading as one team of 5. So can you please make sure that my spot is reserved? It was unfortunate that we had to turn away some people who were so interested in visiting, but it was a packed itinerary, and managing 30 people is very challenging because we are all really accustomed to texting and calling and WhatsApping and Facebooking each other every moment of the day. We had none of that in Cuba. There were no phones. There were no maps. So I actually took out like a couple of printouts of the Google Map area of Havana Vieja, took some copies and was handing them around to everyone in Cuba because no one thought to carry those. And it sort of made us realize how easy we have it nowadays and how tricky it can be to navigate yourself on a paper map, because you can't just turn the direction and have that pointer go in that direction. You have to, again, do that thing where you step into the map and see, okay, am I going in the right direction? But that honestly made it really, that was part of the fun, exciting challenge. And how we did manage to communicate, so we encouraged people to buy walkie-talkies. Okay, everything I'm thinking of right now, this trip was just, it was so many elements of Vinci thrown together. We would actually have conversations where we would turn it on and say, over and out, or who's on the line, and copy that, 10-5. I don't know what 10-5 means, but it sounded fun when we said it on a walkie-talkie. That is how we communicated over there. Sometimes people would not be in range, and sometimes you would find people you were not expecting to be in range to actually respond to your call. It was fun. It was a lot like playing telephone. So we prepared by having every maybe 2 or 3 students present on a particular theme. There were so many themes to pick from. Some of them picked political themes and the history that Cuba has gone through both politically, financially, and economically. Some people picked particular industries, or such as, say, sugarcane or coffee or rum, or the dance and cultural and entertainment industry, because there are a good number of entertainers who have come from Cuba. And we all actually learned more about Cuba after those presentations rather than just the ideas and notions that we had come into when we signed up for the trip. When we actually started the trip, I had all of these plans, and we had so many itinerary items already set up, and we were so on top of it. We were so pleased with ourselves, and then they started falling at the last minute. And that's one of the cultural barriers or challenges I would say we realized when we were in Cuba, was that because it is so untouched and it offers so many opportunities, it is also mired in just the sort of communication gaps or opportunities for people to not be on the same page as you when it comes to scheduling. So a week before we were scheduled to depart, we realized that we had scheduled an appointment at the U.S. Embassy, but we were not going to be able to make that because they wanted to keep an open schedule because of the president's visit. And some of the other schedules that we had lined up also fell through. But that actually gave us an opportunity to explore more. So what you see here is 3 of the students who are on the trip. We are at a sugarcane plantation, and that is an engine behind us that we rode on that train. The first picture was actually 3 of us on that train as well. So what they would showcase here is, we saw the sugarcane plantation. We actually got an opportunity to cut that cane. We got to drink some of that sugarcane juice. And then they showed us how they would actually transport that sugarcane on this engine and take it to different parts of the industry and showcase the processing that happens for sugarcane. And then, talking about sugarcane, we also happened to visit a rum factory.
Nice.
That was always, that was part of the highlight. I think everyone had a field day. We were all really sad that we could only carry back so much rum, but we carried back some really nice pieces of rum. Wow, bottles. But talking about the emporium industry, you would be remiss to think of Cuba and not think of the cigars. Yes, we managed to visit a cigar farm as well. We saw a lot of handmade boxes that they come in. I had actually no idea that it was as big an industry. To me, cigar was just this currency between, Don Draper kind and people who are in the upper echelons, and they do really high-powered business deals, and this is how they seal the deal, by handing each other maybe a really top-of-the-line cigar. But there was a lot that went into it, right from picking which tobacco leaves and cigar leaves to actually manufacture and pick, and how long they dry, what the drying process is like, what the rolling process is like. Lots to learn. We lived in an Airbnb, and the hosts were exceptionally friendly. One of the only, say, barriers that I can think of is that I did not speak Spanish, but we had enough Spanish speakers on the trip. One of them was a great friend of mine. She was staying with us at the same place. I loved how they pronounced her name. Even though her name, I guess, can be a Spanish name, her name is Vera, but they would call her Vera. And it sounded so affectionate to me every time in the morning when they would say that. And then they were so sweet and just generous. They actually had a cell phone, and cell phone minutes were super expensive to purchase over there, because you purchase like 5 or 10 minutes at one time, and they shared one of those with us for emergencies. I learned a lot during this trip, and I think one of the things that I would carry forward from this would just be logistics, trip management. Commanding the attention of 30 people doesn't come easily, but it is really helpful, I think, when you think about team dynamics and how you will always want to be able to navigate them smoothly in the future. I've also been fortunate enough to experience 2 other CEL experiences. One is the Taylor Community Consulting Program and the CEGA Practicum. I would say this was different because I got to go to a different country, got to communicate not on a cell phone or on a laptop, and I got to enjoy lots of experiences which were less learning and educational in nature. But in the tailored consulting project, I got to work with a community leader, and it was just a different kind of fulfilling and satisfying experience. And ditto on the practicum, you learn a lot more about the corporate side and what is the sort of bottom line metrics that make leaders stick over there, and what we learn in the school, and it helped me really bridge that gap. So I think that I learned a lot during this trip, and I cannot wait to experience or have the rest of the class experience their first GMS trip and talk about that. So I will hand it back to Beth now.
Great. So as we mentioned earlier, we're two things. We're a learning center and we're a business. We work with projects, whether they're local, regionally, or even globally. And we try to provide that real impact with that global reach. And so now we have the opportunity for our amazing student leaders to answer any questions that you may have regarding their own experiences or their time within the Olin Business School. We have our very first question, which is, what do you believe is the biggest challenge that you faced within your CEL experience? So whether it's the ambiguity of it or team dynamics, but what do you find was the biggest challenge, and what did you do to overcome it?
Chris Pavlow here. Well, I guess it depends on the project. So the most challenging experience of GMS was, like Ishita said, kind of making sure everyone was on board at the same time. So kind of like herding cats in the morning when we had a 5:30 trip to a farm. Needed to make sure everyone was down early enough the bus wouldn't leave with them. We had a little bit more internet access than I think Ishita did. So our trip wasn't as big of a challenge there, but my bigger challenge came actually on the practicum, where there wasn't as much ambiguity with my particular project, but the structure was very intense, and it was balancing my schedule, the client's schedule, and the other team member schedules, and then just the inter-team communication and dynamics. So I learned probably less about the actual content since I've had some experience in the pharmaceutical industry in the past. However, the leadership experience and the communication experience was really like the most challenging for me. And I think that's my takeaway from the CEL is I'm going to be a consultant next year as well, like Conn at Accenture instead of Bain. And the communication techniques that I learned as part of the practicum and even the GMS trip are core to my skill set moving forward.
Great. So what advice would you give to prospective graduate students that are interested in the CEL in order to get these amazing opportunities and work with these amazing companies? What are some of the different steps that they could take?
Great, this is Conn. What I would suggest on that is, first, let people know that you're interested. So many people apply that have never expressed vocally what they're interested or why they're interested in different things. So that's the first thing. I mean, the CEL is very present in the Olin community, and you can absolutely reach out and talk to people here. So if you're interested in Taylor, if you're interested in community service, or if you're interested in particular industry, I think making that known is very important. The other thing is, if you want to be a leader or you are a leader in your class, absolutely I encourage you to say that you want to be a leader. I think one of the things that most people don't realize is, we take the team leadership role very seriously within the CEL, and we want people who want to be team leaders and are already leaders in their class. So for that, again, expressing that interest, I think, is key.
And the other, if this is Courtney Lee, just to add on to Conn's expressing your interest, also sell yourself to a certain extent. We talked a lot about how the teams are comprised or how they're made by the CEL, and also about the demands of the project, meaning you need to have more than one skill set on the team to be able to carry out the project. Be able to articulate, just as you did and gain an admittance into business school, what it is that you bring to the table and how specifically that'll help with the project.
So we've been talking a lot about global reach in terms of international opportunities. For our international prospective students, what domestic opportunities do we have within the Center for Experiential Learning so they can create that impact, whether it's in our backyard in St. Louis or within the United States?
I think I can speak to at least two of the opportunities that I got to experience I'm an international student here, and I got to experience the local St. Louis culture and how the community is so committed to giving back through the Taylor Community Consulting Program. I worked for a client, Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club. They are in the space where they organize after-school activities, both vocational, sports, and non-sports, as well as tutoring activities for inner-city children. And I got to work on them for a project to increase their customer and alumni engagement. I've also worked for a practicum for a local marketing firm, Keen Strategy, and over there I worked on very marketing and brand management specific project relating to elasticity and how it can just help make his product, and he developed a proprietary product, just give better marketing mix allocation recommendations to his clients. I definitely found both the leadership at CEL and my team very welcoming. If there were any moments where I was confused or faltering with regards to any cultural implications or just anything regarding learning opportunities, I think people always offer help before sometimes because they can anticipate, and they were always very obliging even when you ask. So I definitely have had a very enriching international experience.
Yeah, and just this is Chris again. Just speaking to, there's a new dean that just started on December 1. Dean Mark Taylor came over from Warwick Business School in England, and his main focus is very oriented to the international exposure of our students, while still staying true to the core Midwestern values. Because we're located in a unique city in the U.S., we're not on the coast where some people perceive the people to be the intellectual elite and not really grounded in core values. A lot of what we do here kind of balances the two. So international students that come into the school can balance, their obviously international experience just by sake of being from a different country, and be exposed to a lot of local businesses, because there are strong ties with the school, both through the CEL and other programs that experience kind of the local St. Louis business life. And then additionally, we're trying to expose more and more students to that international exposure, whether you are coming from China and want to experience Africa, or you grew up in St. Louis and want to go to South America. There's a variety of different voices and options for you to listen to and take advantage of.
Great. Final question. You talked, all of you have mentioned this faculty partnership. I know within the Center for Experiential Learning, we don't necessarily have a traditional Monday, Wednesday, Friday class that you come into a traditional classroom, but that real application. So can you talk about what that faculty partnership looked like within your own respective teams, whether it was within Global Management Studies or within your experience within the CEL practicum, and what did you gain from that partnership in this particular situation?
Ishita, Gupta here. I can speak for the partnership help that we received both during the practicum as well as some sessions that we had pre the actual GMS trip to Cuba. So last year there was a counterpart for Conn who was helping along with the operations for practicum, and he was almost always just aware. He was sort of omnipresent. Every time we would have a meeting, somehow or the other, he would find one of us, and he would just have a one-on-one informal conversation, asking us about the status, about how the client was feeling, about any progress updates or any help that he felt we might need from either him or the CEL resources or any faculty member, and how that might help us deliver a more finished, a better deliverable to our clients. Ditto, when it came to the Global Management Studies program, we already had a more structured weekly meeting where we would talk about one of the presentations, one of the industries that we would go over. And before or after that, we would be joined by one of the faculty at the CEL, or sometimes they would just catch us between classes and again ask us about updates. Sometimes they would share information or updates with us and notify that this sort of an event is happening. Would you like to participate or speak or lend your voice to that? So I think they were always there. Yeah.
the Courtney Lee from the Women's Bakery, our situation with our faculty advisors is a little bit different and multidimensional. So our faculty advisor is actually Daniel Bentle, the director of the CEL. But we also had a second-year MBA student that served the same position that Conn is serving this year as a CEL advisor. He traveled with us to Africa. So the role that he served in our team meetings before the trip and during the trip was really to provide an outside perspective and poke holes in our recommendation and strategies. So that was very helpful to hear from an outsider, because as a team, we didn't have the perspective to be able to do that. And obviously we wouldn't want to burden the client with that necessarily. So that was really helpful and a really nice dynamic that the CEL offered to help us build a great deliverable for our client.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today with a couple of different conversations on our global reach within the Center for Experiential Learning. This recording will be available through the Graduate Programs Office here within the Olin Business School, and we wish you much success. Should you have any questions, our contact information is below on the right-hand side of this slide, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.